Hello and welcome back to Perpetual Hype. In today's video, we're talking about more previews from the Doctor Who Commander decks. We're talking about the ones that I missed on my last video or got revealed over the weekend. If you're looking to pick up any single products or sealed product like the Commander decks for Doctor Who, check out coolstuffinc.com and use the link in the description below to get 5% off your order. And don't forget, if you enjoy the video, hit that subscribe button as well so you can see more Magic the Gathering content from me. First up, let's talk about the Master Formed Anew. A 2-mana 0/1 Time Lord Rogue in blue-black legendary, so it can be your commander. It says Body Thief. When you cast a spell, you may exile a creature you control and put a takeover counter on it. And then you may have the Master Formed Anew enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature card in exile with a takeover counter on it. A truly unique version of a clone. We haven't really seen this style of clone before. A 2-mana clone is cheap. It's also good for Gyruda, so they always want even CMC'd clones. But the main thing that makes it unique is the way it exiles creatures. If you're playing this in the 99 or in a constructed format, you have to remember that as it gets cast, you exile a body, and then if it were to be countered, you still lose the body exiled. So it's not an ETB exile thing. Largely, this is mainly irrelevant if it's not your commander. You can recast things that can go to exile and be recast, like a Mist Hollow Griffin, for example, but if you're doing that, it's rather unexciting. The place that the Master Formed Anew gets really spicy is when you play it as your commander. Each time you cast it, you exile a creature and put it into exile with a takeover counter on it, which means each time you cast the Master Formed Anew in future, you can have it replicate a previously exiled creature, or any one from its sort of little toolbox that it creates. In essence, it creates an entire repertoire of identities that you can pick later down the line. Of course, recasting it in Command Zone costs more with the command attacks and such, but it'd be pretty cool if you can hit a utility dork early, a big fatty later, and if you need to hit like another land drop, you can remake that Solemn that you made 2 identities ago. Pretty neat card. Unique in what it does. Then we have the Master Gallifrey's End, a 4-mana Time Lord Rogue. It looks like all the Masters are Time Lord Rogues, meaning they can't have companions. It's a 4/3. It has Make Them Pay. Whenever a non-token artifact creature you control among your opponents, and they may face a villainous choice, they can pay for life, or they can create a token as a copy of that card. So in essence, it's a similar thing to the old 3-mana Athreos that looked to ask people if they pay life, or you get to put creatures back into your hand. But in this case, it skips the having to recast them from hand bit by making token copies. I personally love the villainous choice mechanic within the set, and I really want to see it return for other IPs and Magic stuff further down the line. When we finally face Nicol Bolas again, for example, and I really like this effect where we can get more value out of each of our artifacts. I'm a bit sad to see it say, well, non-token makes sense, but it say creature is a shame. I'd love to be able to sacrifice like Soul Rings and Arcane Signet to maybe get copies of those as well. There's a political aspect where you can ask your opponent to give you the token, like not even consider taking the life loss if we need to get, I don't know, another Meteor Golem to exile a permanent on the board. I think it's a really fun artifact creature payoff in red-black, and again, relatively unique, which I like to see when it comes to new legendary creatures. Then we come to the Master Mesmerist, a 4-mana 3/3 Time Lord Rogue, and he says tap target creature an opponent controls with power less than or equal to the Master's power, gain Skulk until end of turn, and goad it. So he forces other creatures to gain Skulk and attack, and then whenever a creature with Skulk deals combat damage to one of your opponents, put a +1/+1 counter on the Master and draw a card. He is a Skulk payoff that also allows you to play Skulks on your side of the field whilst also manipulating your opponent's creatures. It's pretty cool. It's kind of cute. This might be the card I'm the least excited about, but all the ones I'm in this video, but I still like it because it's so unique. The reason for that, if you're wondering why I'm being so wholly excited about everything, is that I'm primarily talking about the cards that I've picked out for being interesting or exciting, so I'm not exactly going to shit on the cards that I've picked out, unless I've picked it out for being remarkably shit, which in the case of this set, I haven't. The Master Multiplied is a 6-mana 4/3 Time Lord Rogue with Myriad, so when he attacks, you make a copy of him for each opponent that you have, and that taps and attacking. And the Legend rule doesn't apply to creature tokens you control. Trigger abilities you control can't cause you to sacrifice or exile creatures you control either. So there's a lot to unpack here. It's a very exciting commander. So when he attacks, he will make a copy of himself, 2 or 3 copies depending on the number of opponents. I guess if you play more than a pot of 4, it's more than that, but if you do that, you're kind of weird. Anyway, so you get to keep those thanks to this non-legend rule applying. This non-legend rule applying thing is not just a him, so I think that being a general world effect that you can then use to play other legendaries and copy them, I think is pretty sick too, giving you a whole different way to build him. And this third line saying triggered abilities you control don't cause you to sacrifice or exile tokens you control is mad. This means that Sneak Attack no longer makes you sacrifice things at the end of turn. That means that all your Myriad stuff like Blade of Selves doesn't sack at the end of turn either. If you were to play evoke creatures like Grief and Fury, or Titans like Croxa, all 3 of these would be sacrificed due to a triggered ability, and I believe the way this is worded, that wouldn't be the case. It allows you to basically scam a load of value using the Master, as well as have access to this reasonable beta in the command zone, because 2 attacks with him and you've now got like 8 4/3s in play. The other sick thing about him being able to duplicate himself via his own innate myriad means that if someone wants to deal with him to try and turn your legend rule back on to stop you having multiples of another legend in play, for example, then they have to kill not only the Master Multiplied, but all of the token copies of the Master Multiplied. So he has a weird version of inbuilt protection. Of all the Masters, this is the one that I'm most likely to build. Me, the Immortal, is a 5 mana in Rug colors, 3/3 human rogue, who says at the beginning of your combat on your turn, put a choice of a +1/+1 counter, a first strike, vigilance, or menace counter on me, the Immortal. And counters remain on me as it moves to any zone of the player's hand or library. As long as it's not shuffled in or bounced back to hand, it keeps its counters as it goes to command zone, exile, or graveyard. And you may cast me from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other costs. This is like a borderline strict upgrade of Skullbriar the Walking Grave, but I guess you're losing black but gaining both blue and red. And all Skullbriar does have haste, so he can come out of nowhere and slap people, and you can get counters by attacking. Me does that instead by putting counters on her at the beginning of your combat step of your turn, and doesn't have haste. I think she's immensely more powerful and interesting. Just having access to those 2 colors, and also being able to gain like first strike, vigilance, or menace as well to give us some other utility, some like evasive style stuff. It also means if she's blocked, she also gets the counter, which you don't get with Skullbriar. I've seen a lot of people get positive buzz about this, and I think it's a cool design space to re-explore now and again. I'm glad it doesn't happen too often, so it's cool to see a new version of Skullbriar. I also think going down the route of not having it be green, black, and another color, I don't know if that's what it means to be Maisie Williams in the show, but I like the fact that the new version of Skullbriar, inverted commas, is not carrying one of the same colors. So if you want to have this effect in your command zone, you have green, black, or you can have the rug version, and thus you've got like 2 different build paths for this. And this is something I want to see more as we go on and explore commander space more and more with new legendaries, for new sets and new IPs, is have things that are truly unique instead of just having strictly better or better versions of other things. I do understand and appreciate that I said this is basically strictly better Skullbriar, but in essence it's not. That color change is huge, even if we argue that haste is irrelevant. Big fan of this design. I won't be building it, but I'm sure I'm going to be playing against it quite a bit. And then we come to the only one of the main doctors I didn't talk about in the last spoiler video, the War Doctor. So he's a 4 mana 3/5 Time Lord Doctor, meaning you do get a companion, so you can get a 3rd color here via access to any of the companions in the game. And then he says whenever 1 or more other permanents phase out, and whenever one or more other cards are put into exile from anywhere, put a time counter on the War Doctor. And whenever you attack, it deals damage equal to its time counters to any target, and if it's a creature, you exile it. So in essence, we can play a lot of effects that phase and or exile things, and there's a 1,000,000,001 different things we can do with that. Go and name a few in a moment. And we just pile time counters onto the War Doctor and just shoot people in the face. We can remove creatures, but primarily we're going to attack and just shoot people for massive damage. Now, there's a few things here that we need to cover before we talk about like synergies. Firstly, it's number of time counters, not power. When I first read it, I thought it was power, so you can't suit them up with gear to do more damage. Secondly, it is whenever 1 or more. So if you, again, this is something I missed on first reading, if you prepare protection your board in a turn that you have the War Doctor around, he won't get like 30 counters for phasing out 30 things. He'll get 1 counter for an instance of things phasing. Now, there are other ways to do this in a much more finite way. For example, suspending a card, a singular card will put 1 counter onto him. So those things, when you put singular things into exile, will be much powerful. Parallax Wave, for instance, can put 5 counters onto it and then reset a load of ETBs. There's loads of different ways to put counters on him in singular digits, but multiple times. Interestingly, something that Gavin Verhey mentioned is that when you cascade, you actually cascade each card individually. The exile until you hit is each flip checks that card. So if you were to cascade, you could get the War Doctor to get absolutely massive. The example he uses, having a deck full of lands, means you'll probably on average get him to be 86 time counters on him on your first cascade, which allow you to easily one-shot someone. I haven't yet seen the episode, but I know he's playing it on Shuffle Up and Play as well, over on the Prof's channel on the latest episode. Beyond that, I've been wanting to build red-white Abdul Adrian for a while. So Abdul Adrian from the Baldur's Gate sets allows you to play backgrounds with him to get different colors, and I've been playing the blue-white one with a lot of fun. And I want to do all 5 colors, but I kind of got bored before I finished with white, black, and red, white. So now I'm thinking that actual Abdul Adrian might be the secret secondary commander who'll be somewhere in my deck, but when I get him online for some like exile loops with Restoration Angels and Flicker Wisps and similar, we're going to put a ton of counters onto our beloved War Doctor. Next up, we have Wreck and Rebuild, a 3-mana sorcery with choose 1. If you destroy target artifact or enchantment, or mill 5 cards and put a land card from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. This might not seem very exciting for people, but I love cards that do multiple things, that are versatile. The fact this has flashback as well means you can mill 5 cards, hit a land, and put it into play with a 3-mana mode early on when you need a pseudo rampant growth style effect, and then much further down the line, you can flash it back to hit a target or artifact or enchantment out of your bin. I love cards that will just sit around in your graveyard for 5 turns and eventually become useful. And I think 5 mana is not too high of an ask for the flashback either, so I really like this card. I don't think it's competitively playable, but I think it can be seen play in the mid to upper tier of commander decks. Next up we have AST Perth, a 2 mana 2/2 legendary creature human who I went to say was a companion and realized she wasn't a companion. I thought she was in more than one episode. When AST Perth enters the battlefield or attacks, create a food token, and she has brand new sky. Whenever you sacrifice a clue or food, she explores. And if you don't know what explores does at this point, I'm not going to read all that fucking reminder text to you. The interesting thing about this card is that it's Kylie fucking Minogue, and Kylie Minogue, when she ETBs, makes food. So in Magic, Kylie Minogue cooks. That's it. I've got nothing else to say about the card. 4 Norks is 3 mana, vanishing 4 at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, draw a card. So a 3 mana Phyrexian Arena that does not ping you. Now bearing in mind that Phyrexian Arena is a reasonably good card, I still think it's playable in Commander. It's been power crept a little bit, but for 3 mana you don't get a second card draw every turn and lose a life. 4 Nox is that in white, which is kind of crazy to see, but you don't get to draw for very long in theory because the vanishing will tick down and the enchantment will go. However, if you have ways to recur this in white, which recurring a 3 CMC permanent is pretty easy, or in the case of the Doctor Who decks, ticking up the valid number of time counters on it via your commanders and similar, then you could probably keep this around for a long time, or recur it and reuse it ongoing. I think people are really all over the place on how good this card actually is because of the debate about Phyrexian Arena and how good that is in current Commander. Outside of like top tier high powered Commander, I think Phyrexian Arena is still really good. I think having just 1 extra draw every turn is incredibly powerful, and the fact that it's white makes it even better. So with Phyrexian Arena, the conversation really comes down to the fact there's a lot of black cards out there that draw you cards, where in white, let's say this is on a mono white deck, or let's say a white red deck, there isn't that many effects that just raw dog put a new card into your hand every turn on top of your normal draw step. So to get access to a Phyrexian Arena style effect with no life loss, but with some downside that we have to mitigate in white, is kind of incredible. If you told me this card was going to get printed like 5 years ago, I would not have believed you. Don't forget, I am the guy who did the videos talking about how white fucking sucked in Commander, and they needed to improve it. I believe I banged that drum more than most, and I genuinely believe Wizards of the Coast have done the right thing, they've done a good thing, they've answered our prayers, and they've listened to the community, and they've made white a lot better in the 4-player Commander and multiplayer variants of Magic. So it really makes me laugh when we hear people just bang the same drum that Wizards never listen or never do good by the community, because it's quite clear they fucking listened when you see a card like 4 Nox. I'll be honest, it's really funny being so fucking positive about these things because people expect me to rag on them, and I'm only going to rag on them when I think they're doing wrong. I think stuff like this is actually phenomenal. Ian Chesterton looks like not Bill Murray, but the other one from Ghostbusters. Ah, fuck. Is it Ackerton? The one who made the Crystal Skull vodka. Dan Aykroyd. Fuck me, that was on the tip of my tongue. Dan Aykroyd. So Ian Chesterton looks like Dan Aykroyd. I don't believe it is Dan Aykroyd, but considering he is like a scientist in Ghostbusters, I just keep thinking this is the character from Ghostbusters. Anyway, 3 mana 2/3. He's a science teacher. Each saga spell you cast has replicate. That replicate cost is equal to its mana cost, and he's a companion. So when combined with the 6th Doctor, we can have it that when we're casting a saga now, we can pay its mana cost 1 more time and get 3 entire copies of it because sagas are also historic. So we can play Bant sagas with this as our companion and the 6th Doctor, which is pretty cool because as far as I know it, there isn't really a good Bant saga commander barring the Enchantress Merfolk in Bant color. I'm not really sure which sagas really slap like this. My first thought was Double Wenchigo's Reign of Truth to give target creature +1/+1 until end of turn twice for each enchantment and artifact we control, so we can just absolutely smack the shit out of somebody. But the interesting thing about the sagas that flip is that when we have a copied one, we cannot flip it to the other side because it doesn't have another side. So the value isn't really there in that. Regardless of myself struggling to find the exact place to copy, I mean, we could also put them in blue, red, and then copy like Saga, Kiki Jiki Saga and shit, but I think it's cooler to do triple copying more than one. But ultimately, I'm not going to build Ian Chesterton myself, but I do think it's cool that there is now space for a Saga commander in multiple colors. The partner mechanic, or your revision of the partner mechanic like Doctor's Companion, plus a unique effect like this, opens up so much space for people to brew and build, and I love that. And the other reason I'm not going to build Chesterton is that Romana 2, I don't know why. Is that 2? Is that 11? Is that 2 eyes? I'm not sure. Either way, this 4 mana 3/3 Vigilant Doctor's Companion says 1 mana tap, create a tapped token as a copy of target token that entered the battlefield this turn. This means when you combo her with the 6th Doctor for 1 mana and a tap, we can copy the sagas as opposed to have to pay the whole replicate cost. So I think I prefer this in terms of copying the tokens that we end up making off the 6th Doctor, and I'm very tempted by either this or the one that gives historic spells Convoke to make them the white commander of choice or a companion of choice in my command zone for the Bant 6th Doctor deck. This card fucking rules, and I love it because alongside doubling seasons and stuff, I can get really mathy by just making a fuck ton of tokens. Cyber Conversion is 2 blue instant turn target target creature face down. It's a 2/2 side mana artifact creature. This might just be one of the better removal spells we've ever seen in blue. I mean, we've already got instant speed exile thing and make a more for a manifest. That already exists, but I think this is so strong for just turning off all the abilities of a card. Not putting it into the graveyard either to be recurred. Of course, when you turn a card face down, you can get it turned face back up by a very few effects in the game, but the other thing you can do is bounce it back to hand. So if you turn your opponent's creature into a Cyberman face down, they will be able to put it back into the hand via a Crystal Shard style effect in order to recast it later. So it doesn't completely remove that problem from the game. This card I fucking love. 500 Year Diary is a 4 mana legendary artifact clue that enters the battlefield tap. It taps to add blue for each clue you control, and 2 mana sacrifice 500 Year Diary to draw a card. In essence, it is a clue that taps to make blue for each clue you control. Now, my main use for this is going to be using Tireless Tracker and a load of fetch land nonsense to make a load of clues and power this up to be my own mini Tolarian Academy. There's also a hell of a lot of investigate in the Vetro deck with some of the white cards that investigate when you attack or cast historic spells. There's going to be a whole load of different ways to create clues just in the deck itself. I think clue creation it's not as out of control as treasures, but the fact that we've now got a mana sink on the back of it is wonderful, and I love tapping something for blue mana. X equals the number of clues you control, artifacts you control. I love I love Tolarian Academy, so I'm going to be playing this card in multiple decks in Commander. Flatline is a 3 mana instant. It says creatures your opponents control have base power after 0/1 until end of turn. It doesn't turn off abilities or keywords or static or activate or whatever, but it does just turn them all into 0/1s, which makes them easy to kill with some small damage wrath, or just makes a combat attack and block an absolute fucking blowout. There will be situations where this will allow you just to kill people with trample when they least expect it, because you can just turn all the creatures to 0/1s and they no longer have enough toughness to block your middling Crater Hoof attack. That's right, comment section. We figured out a way to fucking break Crater Hoof Behemoth, and it's a 3 mana blue instant. Nardo is a 2 mana 1/2 that taps to add blue for each counter on Nardo. Spend this mana only to cast non-creature spells, and it has Undying. The reason I'm bringing it up is A, it's Matt Lucas on a Magic card. That makes me feel, I don't know how that makes me feel with the way how much I hate Little Britain as a TV show, but the fact that it's a blue creature that's also a mana dork that also has Undying, I find that really fascinating in terms of design space. I assume he's a cyborg, it says in the name, because obviously this is like a Power Stone style effect. If you can put a lot of counters onto him to make him into a big mana dork, that is super interesting in blue, super unique in blue. That's why I'm bringing it up. But I don't think I'm going to play this card because I don't want to look at his fucking face. The Flood of Mars, a 4 mana 3/3 island walking creature, alien zombie horror. The main guy in the art looks like the dude who plays the brother of Joel in The Last of Us, who also plays Magic. Gabriel Luna, that's it. I actually just checked on IMDb. Gabriel Luna was not in Doctor Who. I thought it was him in this art. It's an island walking 3/3 alien zombie horror, which is a great type line for a creature. And whenever the Flood of Mars attacks, put a flood counter on another target, a creature or land. If it's a creature, it becomes a copy of Flood of Mars, so it turns other creatures into water zombies, which I think is a very cool way to evoke that zombie theme. Or if it's a land, it becomes an island addition to its other types. I'm sad to see it into addition to its other types. I'd love that it just turned lands into islands full stop, turning off their abilities and making them tap for blue, but mana denial is not something that Wizards of the Coast like to print anymore, so I'm kind of pissed about that. Cool idea. It's interesting that you can turn your creature into more Flood of Mars if you want to turn everything into Flood of Mars, or you can just turn other people's things into Flood of Mars to make them worse blockers, I guess. Also, observe it does have Island Walk, like I mentioned, so turning one of their lands into an island means it gets through, so it's actually quite an evasive threat in that sense. Quantum Misalignment is a 5 mana sorcery which says create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it isn't legendary, and has rebound, meaning that you can put it into exile and recast it on the following upkeep, which allows you to have a card cast from exile, which triggers a lot of stuff in these decks, because casting from anywhere but hand is powerful for a lot of these commanders, the Doctors and shit. Quantum Misalignment has got a few things going on. Firstly, it only copies creatures you control, which is something I really strongly dislike in my clones, meaning that I probably end up never playing this card. The other thing is that it makes it a non-legendary copy, which I've seen people complaining about and saying is more common in Magic these days. The idea that legendary is no longer a downside like it once was, because most copy spells actually remove that downside anyway. Gavin Verhey actually responded to this criticism on Twitter a little while back, a couple of days ago. I couldn't find the tweet when I was getting ready to send this stuff to the editor, but essentially he mentions how this is a design consideration specifically for this product and for this set, that there's so many legendary creatures that all the clone effects, not saying that would make them near useless within the not only confined to their own deck, but interplay with the rest of the cards in the set. So it's basically a design consideration for this. I like that rationale and I can see it and understand it. I hope that means that as we go on, clone effects will not remove the legend rule as often as we tend to see it at the moment, because it does make legendary not really matter. Traverse Eternities are 4 mana, draw cards equal to the highest mana value among historic opponents you control. That's artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. This seems like a pretty decent draw spell. There's a few effects like this that already exist that are pretty good, but at 4 mana to draw cards off of legendaries or sagas or artifacts is pretty good. I can see this seeing some amount of play in middle to high power decks and getting cut once you get into the more efficient territories. And they gave us a black companion in case you want your doctors to have access to black in the colour pie with a 4 mana 2/5 rogue Vizsla Turlo, who says when Vizsla Turlo enters the battlefield you may have an opponent gain control of it. If you do, it's goaded for as long as they control it, so it can't attack you. It's a sleeper agent, a spy as such. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So it does give the player you give it to card draw, but it does also shoot them in the face like a Castle Locthwain for how many cards they have in hand, which is a pretty cool and unique political card. You'll be able to ask people who wants the card draw perhaps and give this to them. I like this a lot. The other interesting thing I like about this, as this enters the battlefield and gets copied by something, for example, the 6th Doctor. Yes, I'm talking about them a lot, but I think they're a really cool card. If you copy Vizsla Turlo, you didn't give the other one away before the Legend rule is checked, I believe. So you can give away a Vizsla Turlo to 2 different players. They can both have one, and it won't get fucked by the Legendary rule. You know that thing I just said about the Legendary rule not mattering? At least here we had to jump through a hoop for that to happen. I love these kind of cards. Into the Time Vortex is a 5 mana cascade spell with no other text other than rebound. So in essence, you cast it and you cascade, then you put it into exile itself, and then cast on the following turn, you cascade, and it just gets you a lot of stuff out of exile, triggering all the effects, all the doctors that care about things being cast not from hand, and just ends up being one of these really cool and unique cards that actually doesn't do anything. It simply enables other things through the careful application of 2 keyworded abilities. I love it. Return to the Past is a 6 mana spell that shows, is she a Corey actress? I think she was in Coronation Street or Emmerdale. Either way, she's now walking across no man's land during Christmas, about to go and watch as Blackadder runs over the top of the trenches or some shit. I don't know. I've never watched that episode of Doctor Who. Either way, 6 mana enchantment. As long as it's your turn, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. Its flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. In essence, this 6 mana enchantment is Past in Flames all the fucking time. Now look, Past in Flames is a combo enabler. Past in Flames is a card that sees huge amounts of play in other formats outside of Commander. In Cube and Legacy and Modern, it can allow you to power up spell-based combos out of the yard. Will Return the Past be that good? Probably not. It's 6 mana and it can be blown up and you have to like cast it to do nothing and pass the turn and then get the turn back, probably. However, in Commando, where there's 1,000 different problem permanents in play at once anyway, Return to the Past, or Return the Past, can give you a huge amount of value out of your instants and sorceries and your spell-based combo or your spell-based value engine out of the graveyard. Now, interestingly, Lear to Sideboard of the Drowned is a 5 mana 3/4 that allows you to cast things from your bin. Each instant sorcery card in your graveyard has flashbacks. It has the same text, so I believe this will function the same. So what this means with Return the Past is that you'll be able to cast adventure cards from your graveyard, and then instead of them going to exile like you would with a flashback spell, they actually go into the adventure exile and cast them later, because that's all they care about. Absolutely solid card. I think this will be very powerful in the right decks. I think it's going to have a quite high price tag if it doesn't see much reprints. But the upside of a lot of these things, these powerful auto includes for spell-based combos like Return the Past, is that the name might be evocative of a line or an episode name in Doctor Who, but it's not trademarked. So Return the Past is a name they can reprint later on in Magic Skin or in another intellectual property, and thus we can get reprints for these cards. That isn't as easy when it comes to named characters. And lastly, a cute little card, 6 mana, the 5 Doctors. Search your library for 5 Doctors and put them in your hand, or you can kick it for 5 to put them all into play. Bearing in mind this can hit anything if you have a Masterwood Nexus in play, so yeah, fill your boots. It's like super Tooth and Nail. It's like Tooth and Nail on crack cocaine if you have a Masterwood Nexus, if you have an adaptive mutation in play, or any of the cards that allow you to name a creature type and make all your creatures in your library those types. But ultimately, I just think it's a very cool enabler for the Doctor synergies or the Doctor payoffs that we see in these decks. I also just think it's really funny that we have cards that care about Doctor as a creature type, and that we might one day get, I don't know, a House Secret Lair, or what's another famous Doctor? I don't know. I was going to say Doctor Who, but we've already done that. Either way, some other famous Doctor is a Doctor and can then be grabbed with the 5 Doctors. Like some sort of weird cameo where we get 4 Doctor Whos and the 5th card is just Hugh Laurie playing a dickhead. Anyway, that's the end of my roundup of the last of the cards that I think are super exciting or interesting. Although all of the stuff is. Some of the reprints are great too, like Sunbait Canyon and similar. But ultimately, I'm really excited for these. I think I'm just all in on Magic doing this crossover mashup thing now. I fucking love Smash Bros and similar stuff, so seeing my favorite card game of all time do the same thing just fills me with a lot of excitement. I'm really thrilled to see how well they do with the Fallout decks, which is a franchise and IP that I already love. And beyond that, I know I've made jokes about not watching Doctor Who in this video, but just so you all know, I've actually watched like 7 episodes of Eccleston and 2 episodes of the 6th, and I watched the first episode of the 13th Doctor as well, and basically the Doctor Who Commander stuff has got me into Doctor Who. I might do a whole video talking about that as a weird phenomena. Either way, let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.